Okay, guys, you have this last reading. This is Upton Sinclair. It's known as The Jungle, but this is called The Attack on the Meat Packers. I'm going to read the introduction. We're going to skip the questions. We don't have to do the questions, but we're going to do some of the reading. Today, we often take for granted the government legislation that protects our health. Investigative reports on television even go into great lengths to show us when health guidelines are being violated. In other words, we assume the food available to us for us to eat is safe. The federal government, however, was not always so involved in such an issue. You may want to review the section of your textbook about progressivism before we look at this. We've kind of been reading it. So I'm going to skip the questions. We're just going to get into this reading. We're going to start down here where it says source. So, and then there was the condemned meat industry with its endless horrors. The people of Chicago saw the government inspectors in Packentown, and they all took it to mean that they were being protected from diseased meat. They did not understand that these 163 inspectors had been appointed at the request of the packers, and that they were being paid by the United States government to certify that all diseased meat was kept in the state. They had no authority beyond that for the inspection of the meat to be sold in the city, in the state, and the whole force packed town consisted of 3 henchmen of the local political machine. So looking at this, we know our federal government only has the authority to make rules over things that cross state lines. And so they're only allowing the clean meat to leave the state of Illinois. All the bad meat is going to stay in Chicago. And we know the political machine is kind of profiting off of this. So, and there was potted game and potted grouse and potted ham and deviled ham, deviled, as some of the men called it. Deviled ham was made out of the waste ends of the smoked beef that there was too small to be sliced by the machine, and also dyed with chemicals so that it would not show white, and the trimmings of the hams and the corned beefs and potato skins and all, and finally the cartilaginous glutes of the beef after the tongues had been cut out. All of this ingenious mixture was grounded up and flavored with spices to make it taste like something. Anybody who could invent a new imitation had been sure of a fortune from the old dirham, said the Jurgis informant. But it was hard to think of anything new in a place where so many Okay, so we flip the page. So many sharp wits had been at work for so long, where men welcomed tuberculosis in the cattle that they were feeding because it made them fatten more quickly, and where they bought up all the old rancid butter left over in the grocery stores of a continent and then oxidized it and by a forced air process to take away the odor, returned it with skim milk and sold it in bricks in the cities. So our factory is not being considerate. It's thinking, how is it going to make money? And it makes money by bringing in bad products, trying to fix them up, and reselling this stuff that could mess up your tummy. Okay, so the next thing we're going to read about is working conditions. And that's what originally Upton Sinclair had done. He was writing this book to focus on the working conditions. But really what's going to happen is people are going to read about the working conditions and be grossed out about what's going in their meat. So just reflect on what jobs are really bad here. And there were men in the pickle rooms, for instance, where old Antanas had gotten his death. Scarce one of these that had not some spot of horror on his person. Let a man so much as scrape his finger in pushing a truck in the pickle room, and he might have a sore that would put him out of this world. All the joints of his fingers might be eaten by the acid one by one. Of the butchers and the floorsmen, the beef boners and trimmers, all of those who use knives, you could scarcely find a person who had the use of his thumb. Time and time again, the base of it had been slashed, till it was a mere lump of flesh against which the man pressed the knife to hold it. The hands of these men would be crisscrossed with cuts, until you could no longer pretend to count them or to trace them. They would have no nails. They had worn them off by pulling the hides. Their knuckles were swollen, so their fingers spread out like a fan. There were men who worked in the cooking rooms, in the midst of the steam and the sickening odors by the artificial light. In these rooms, the germs of tuberculosis might live for 2 years, but the supply was renewed every hour. There were the beef luggers, who carried 200-pound quarters in the refrigerated carts, a fearful kind of work that began at 4 o'clock in the morning and that wore out the most powerful men in a few years. There were those who worked in the chilling rooms, whose special disease was rheumatism. The time a man could work in the chilling rooms was said to be 5 years. Okay. There were the wool pluckers, whose hands went to pieces even sooner than the hands of the pickle men, for the pelts of the sheep had to be painted with acid and loosen the wool. And then there were the pluckers who had to pull out the wool with their bare hands, till the acid had eaten their fingers off. There were those who made the tins for the canned meat, and their hands too were a maze of cuts, and each cut represented a chance of blood poisoning. Some of the workers at the stamping machines, as it was very seldom that one could work there as long as the pace was set at the pace that was set, and had not given out and forgotten himself and have part of his hand chopped off. There were the hoisters, as they were called, whose task it was to press the lever which lifted the dead cattle off the floor. They ran along the rafters, peering down through the damp and steam, and as the old Durham architects had not built the killing room for the convenience of the hoisters, at every few feet they would have to stoop under a beam, say 4 feet above the one they ran on, which got them into the habit of stooping, so that in a few years they would be walking around like chimpanzees. Worst of any were the fertilizer men and those who served in the cooking rooms. These people could not be shown to the visitors, for the odor of these fertilizer men would scare away any ordinary visitor at 100 yards, as for the other men who worked in the tank rooms full of steam. And in some, there were open vats near the floor. I don't know if y'all know what a vat is, but these vats are like giant blenders, okay? So like it's floor and they have these giant blenders that are huge. So there were the open vats near the level of the floor. The peculiar trouble was that they fell into the vats. And when they were fished out, there was never enough of them worth being exhibited. Sometimes they would be overlooked for days till the bones of them had gone out of the world in Durham's pure leaf lard. Okay, so I know we talked about a lot of jobs here. And again, this is what Upton Sinclair is looking at. He's like, wow, people's hands are being cut up. There's blood poisoning. There's blood going into it. People are losing their arms at the stamping machines. People are getting acid in their hands. People are getting bad postures because they have to duck under the rafters. And the last thing is that people are actually going into the meat. They're falling into these blenders and they're being blended in and becoming lard or different parts of the cow. Okay, so now, again, he was focusing on the working conditions, but now we're completely grossed out on what's going in our meat. There was never the least attention paid to what was cut up for sausage. There would come all the way back from Europe old sausage that had been rejected, and that was moldy and white. It would be dosed with borax and glycerin and dumped into the harpers and made over for home consumption. There would be meat that had tumbled out onto the floor in the dirt and the sawdust where the workers had tramped and spit uncounted billions of consumption germs. There would be meat stored in great piles in rooms, and the water from the leaky roofs would drip over it, and thousands of rats would race upon it. It was too dark in these storage places to see well, but a man could run his hands over these piles of meat and sweep off handfuls of dried dung of rats. These rats were nuisances, and the packers would put out poisoned bread for them, and they would die, and then the rats, the bread, and the meat would go into the hoppers together. This is no fairy story and no joke. The meat would be shoveled into the carts. The man who did the shoveling would not trouble to live out a rat, even when he saw one. There were things that went into the sausage in comparison to which a poisoned rat was a tidbit. There was no place for men to wash their hands before they ate their dinner, so they made the practice of washing them in the water that was to be ladled into the sausage. There would be the butt ends and the smoked meat, the scraps of corned beef, and all the odds and ends and the waste in the plants. They would be dumped into the old barrels and cellars and left there. Under the system of rigid economy which the packers enforced, there were some jobs that it only paid to do once in a long time. Among these was the cleaning out of the waste barrels. Every spring they did it. In the barrels there would be dirt and rust and old nails and stale water, and a cartload after cartload of it would be taken and dumped into the hoppers of the fresh meat and sent out to the public's breakfast. Some of it would make it into smoke. Some they would make into smoked sausage. But as the smoking took time and there was for expensive, they would call upon the chemistry department and preserve it with borax and color it with gelatin and make it brown. All of their sausage came out of the same bowl, but when it came to wrap it, they would stamp some special, and for this they would charge 2 cents more a pound. So now we're reading about what goes into the sausage, and people, they've completely forgotten about the working conditions and are now kind of grossed out about what's going out into the meat. So the federal government is there at this time, and they're regulating, saying, whoa, we can't have this go out in our meat. And so again, they've forgotten about the workers, and really what this is going to spark is the Pure Food and Drug Act that requires, if you look at any of your food items, I just have my water here. Do y'all see how there's labels? It tells you what's in it. We're going to see the federal government is going to require in the Pure Food and Drug Act that you report what's in items. It's also going to require the Meat Inspection Act that requires people to, the inspectors to inspect meat that goes over state lines. I'm not going to read the rest. Sorry to ruin your lunch or breakfast or just ruin your stomach. But these are exposés at this time. Like many of you watched Fast Food Nation or other things. We like hearing the dirt. And it's the expose of these muckrakers that's going to lead to government regulation. And it's government regulation for the consumers. It's government regulation for the benefit of the people at the expense of the business. Okay. So next time your project's due, and we're gonna have presentations in class. You need to make sure that you share your project with me on Google Docs. Share your image as well. I will be grading these at home, but you will be going over them as a class, because what will happen is we have a sheet that we'll be doing that will be filling out stuff on people. So like I have Eugene V. Debs, he's on here. Socialism, what is his importance? So we will be filling out notes. Like this is my little key that I have here that I'll be posting online for y'all. But we should be getting who your person is, what was their area of interest, what were their accomplishments. And so you will be doing your presentations. They should be shared with me. Also, it needs to be shared with me on Google Docs. You need to have everything ready so you can be able to present in class. If your image is you printed it out or you've drawn it on your own, make sure you take a picture and send me that. We're going to be doing these presentations so that you don't have to read all about all of the people in this chapter. I think there should be some time that y'all could sit down and if there's laptops in the classroom to start working on that. Many of you should probably make sure that you get the book out, because that's what I will be judging you on the significance. So if you do not know why Thomas Nast is significant and he's your person, look in the book, because that's what I'm judging you on, is that information in the book. Yes, there'll probably be a sentence or two, but you could look up other stuff beyond that. But the stuff in the book is why they're worthy in this chapter, okay? So like if I had Thomas Nast, his area of interest would be political cartoons. His accomplishment is that he exposed Boss Tweed and he took down political machines. So I would be able to fill that, but I promise you that is stuff straight from the book. So make sure that you're using the book. Y'all don't have homework tonight. So make sure you're finishing this project up so that you could be ready to present. We'll be presenting Wednesday and Thursday, and if we don't get done fully on Thursday, we'll start some on Friday, okay? If you have any questions, email me. You need to email me your project, okay? you need to have your own copy of it so that you can present in class. Okay.